Hi, I'm Evie Kimsing, editor of identityweek.net. In the lead up to our next event in June in Amsterdam, we're going to be speaking now with Stephen Chapman, who's ex HMPO, has worked for government for decades, is a travel document um, expert on ICAO standards, and he joins me now to really go through the trends in the ID document space and also digital ID. Stephen, it's great to speak to you this morning.
Hello, Evie. It's good to speak to you. I'm really looking forward to this and seeing what you've got for me.
Um, just to start then, because I think it was last year or the year before, I actually visited your HMPO offices and was given a lovely tour and really saw the manufacturing side, the issuance, the design of the passports, and also the public facing administration parts, which was really fascinating. And I know you've left there now, but could you give us an idea of when you're issuing ID documents, how you ensure the process remains both secure and efficient for citizens?
Yeah. Obviously, I can't say too much about the internal matters of HM Passport Office, um, but in general terms, the really important thing is there's a balance. There's a real balance to be had. I've Part of the role I had at the Passport Office was to look at how other countries do things, and we had a mantra there which was "steal with pride." So we would look and see where best practice was around the world, bring it back, see if it would work for us, see if we can learn from others. So I've seen how countries strive to achieve a balance between secure and efficient, and also good customer service. And that's one thing in HMPO. We had a balance between the three different elements. How efficient, so how cost effective it is, how secure it is, and are we providing a good customer service? And getting we used to describe it as a tension between the three elements. The security people would tell you you don't want to give good customer service because it's insecure. And the finance people would be saying, yeah, and it costs a lot. But then on the customer service side, you'd be saying, well, yeah, if we could give good customer service, we get the right information from the people at the right time. That's efficient. We get the right information that's accurate. That helps on sort of the counter fraud effort. So we need to get a real attention, a balance between this. So looking at how many other countries have done that, not one country I've seen has a perfect system. What they almost all having is a balance for them according to their laws, culture, and what their populations and politicians will accept. So I'm not going to name names on which countries I think are weak or strong, as that's both unfair and may even lead to them being targeted by the bad guys. But what I will say is the UK system has been criticised by others ways, but is actually really robust. I just can't say why. But just to reiterate, balance, that's the most important thing, according to what your law and culture in particular allows you to do. I think the
Absolutely.
UK does it really well.
Yeah, and you're right to draw comparisons to other countries. We're all thinking about ID documents and actually digital ID. Um,
Hmm.
we talk about fraud and often border security trends and how they influence the developments in ID document design. Could you kind of, to your knowledge, what are these developments in the security of the documents?
Right. So the issue or the problem, I should say, because otherwise I'll say the word issue too many times. The problem that passport issuers have is it takes a long time to design and develop a document, so a passport. The normal lead-in time that the UK has and that many other countries has is at least 2 years. If it takes you less than 2 years to design and produce passport or ID document, you've probably not done it well enough. And so with these long lead-in times, you can't be immediately reactive. So you've got both elements of catch up and prediction. So in terms of catch up, I think what we're looking at nowadays and where ICAO is pushing forward is encoding the image both in physical and electronic terms on passports and ID documents. And so ICAO's Doc 9303, which is the Bible, if you like, if you want to, don't mind me using that semi-religious term, on how passports and ID documents should be designed and issued, they currently use an ISO standard called 19794. But that's from 2005. It's been amended, but it's from 2005. So there's a transition up until 2030 to ISO 39794. So ICAO, using the Implementation and Capacity Building Working Group and their communication subgroup, of which I'm a part, we're looking at making sure that issuing authorities around the world know they need to transition to this new standard, which means that passport e-gates or automated passport control booths have a much better quality image to work from to run their facial recognition, whether it's one-to-one or one-to-many. And so that's something where we're playing a bit catch up because we're aware that facial recognition algorithms are moving forward really fast, but they need a good quality image. In the prediction side, the most important thing, as far as I am aware, is quantum computing. Now, we're told that this isn't a thing yet, but you can bet the first country that breaks that enables the use of quantum computing to break down encryption, they're not going to tell anybody that they've done it. So anyone involved in tech, and particularly when we're talking about secure documents, they really need to be laser focused on that right now and looking as to how they can future-proof their documents. So catch up, facial recognition, ICAO are pushing on that. And in the future, everyone needs to be looking at how they're going to protect themselves against quantum threats.
Absolutely. That's really interesting to hear. Um, are there any, moving away now, are there any specific groups for whom ID inclusion should be improved when it comes to, ID cards, passports, when we're thinking about refugees, asylum seekers, everyone who makes up our societies,
Yeah.
um, across the world with this emphasis on everyone having an ID or a digital ID?
Yeah, absolutely. There are several groups that come to mind. And I think if you're in a country where you have a universal ID system, one of the big things is that everyone has an ID of some sort, whether it's electronic or physical. Um, so there are areas there where, in the UK in particular, we don't have that. So we have what you might perceive as a weakness. For example, people on low ID, low ID, low income, won't necessarily have easy access to ID because the passport's expensive. So one thing I would argue for is a subsidization or even free passports. Now, obviously, there will be political issues around that, and I'm not going to get into that at all. But I'm aware, I think, in certain circumstances, people on very low incomes on benefits can get help with paying for a passport if there's no other form of valid ID they have access to. Um, that's not something the Passport Office does or central government does, as far as I'm aware, but I think there are ways and means. So that's definitely one group. And I'll come back to why that's important for society as a whole in a minute. Secondly, there are people, and this is something that is the focus, ongoing focus of the British Passport Office and others as well, is people who have restricted vision, blind or degrees of blindness. So for them, one of the things that's been identified decades ago is that if there's a family and more than one person has sight problems, how do they know whose passport is who? So they could turn up at an airport with the wrong passport if unless there's someone there to help them through it. So for a long period, the Passport Office in the UK has issued Braille stickers, but they're very low tech, not really very effective, very outdated. So before I left, we were looking at what other countries do, what's possibly be done. So we spoke to the Royal National Institute for the Blind and talked through some of the possibilities. We looked at what other countries do, and in particular, and I'm going to name names now, Portugal, Malta, and I think Malaysia have got some really good examples of how to help people with sight issues. Um, HMPO are aware of this. So hopefully, under the new contract that comes in a few years' time, if not before, we might see some developments there for the benefit of those groups. But I don't know. I'm outside now, so I don't know exactly what's going on. The last group that really concerns me is those people who, and again, it may be those who don't have the ability to travel, whether that's because of a physical impairment or financial. If they don't have access or need of a passport or an ID document, their identities could be what you might term cuckooed. You could have an organized criminal group or even individuals taking over their ID in the knowledge that that person's never going to need a passport. So they can insert their own photograph or biographical details onto another person's identity. So again, for me, I would say what governments and passport issuers should be looking at is how to protect that person's ID, not just because it's the individual's identity that's going to be compromised, but your whole country's border security and also banking system and all the other things that passports and ID documents can be used for. It allows the fraudsters to get in and take advantage. So for me, those are the three groups that I would hope that passport issuers are particularly focused on helping. And it's not just, as I say, for the individual's benefit, it's for society's benefit as a whole.
And go back to security.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, the thinking about those different groups, and it's really good. Um, Moving on to your thoughts on the UK's plans to introduce obviously ownership of digital identity, really, and it's been promoted really around this idea of stricter rules around citizenship and immigration controls, in particular. Would you agree with that take on it?
Ooh, okay. So full disclosure first. I was in HM Passport Office's predecessor, the Identity Passport Service from 2007. And 2007 to 2010, we had an active program to try and introduce ID cards and a national register. And I was working on that. My particular role was to, again, to look at what other countries did, steal their ideas, bring back good practice, and see how we could best offer something to the public. What I saw in other countries, especially Estonia, was a particular focus at the time. They were well ahead of many other countries, was some really good examples of how we could use ID, a formalized central government provided or backed ID. Um, as history tells us, the politics got in the way, program was scrapped. There were decisions really then that were made about what the utility of the identity system was that didn't really work. And I'm concerned that the recent announcements for the UK's identity system focused on immigration. That's not really, I mean, it's something that can be effective with, but that's not really the full benefits for society. For allowing the individual to prove who they say they are in a way that works and works across the whole of society. I see from Estonia and other countries, whether it's a physical card or a digital electronic ID, is really beneficial for the individual as well as for society as a whole. But I think what really needs to be done is work on the messaging and what are you really trying to achieve? That really needs to be explained properly. And just putting all that on the immigration space, I personally, I don't think it's helpful. But I'm not in that. I'm not working on that now. So I'm just more or less a spectator. But so what I would say is, in conclusion, hope this time they get it right.
Yeah, we've kind of gone down this road before, and
Mm,
we both know kind of the benefits of ID and digital ID, for that personal security and the access to services and privacy. And that's
mm,
probably what we should be thinking about in terms of these plans, not
yeah.
the immigration side. So yeah, it's really interesting though to get your thoughts on that. Um, what role does HMPO and government play in shaping our national and international focus on ID standards, which plays a big part in it?
Yeah. This is very personal to me, so you'll probably need to stop me because I could go on for hours about this one. So I represented the UK and HM Passport Office in the International Civil Aviation Organisation, and I still play that role to a smaller extent, but obviously not representing the UK. Um, I also went to a lot of European Union working group meetings back when we were in the EU, the G8, which became the G7, the Roma Leon group on migration experts, and many other bilateral and multilateral forums. So I hope that the work that I did is being continued. And I see that at least some of it is. So that's really good to hear from others. Um, but the short answer to does what role does HMPO play is huge, huge, because what we want to make sure as the UK is that whenever there are international standards and practices are put forward into the public domain, especially through ICAO, which is a global organization, that the UK can work with them. That it's not going to be something that forces the UK to completely change the system that we've got. For example, civil registration, births, deaths, marriages. The UK system goes back hundreds of years and has evolved over that time. Some of the legislation being used, I think, I could be wrong, could be simply corrected, still goes back over 100 years. To change that would fundamentally alter the way in which UK society functions. So we need to be very careful that whilst we do want international security, global standards to be raised, that we're not trying to undermine the basic structure of how the UK works. So it's really important that HMPO and other parts of government as well makes sure that what's being proposed or what is proposed by the UK helps the whole globe move forward, but not to the detriment of the UK. I mean, that's a really selfish attitude, but really, what I would like to see is more countries doing that. Something that the ICAO working groups have long struggled with is that what you might term the first world, like the richer societies or the West, if you like, have had a strong say in how passports and identity documents evolve, the technology and the use at the border and so on. Um, and that's wrong because one of ICAO's mantras is no country left behind. And if the US or the UK or Austria or Italy comes up with a solution or an idea, we really need to make sure it works for the rest of the world. So within the ICBWG, the ICAO Working Group on Capacity Building, um, we've got a subgroup that's looking at helping and, in fact, understanding, not just helping, how small states, specifically those in the Pacific, the small states that are under threat from global warming and as the water rises and so on, how they can implement all these wonderful ideas that we in Europe, for example, have. So I'm really happy and excited to see that Australia are in partnership with Tuvalu to help them improve their offerings for the benefit of the Tuvalu citizens, as well as for the security of the Australian border. It's great. That's exactly the sort of thing I want to see. So I would really urge countries not involved in ICAO working groups to pull your finger out and get in there to make sure that something's not going to be imposed on you by those of us that are already there. And that's sort of the unselfish bit. But I'm still quite selfish. For me, UK national interests are my interests. And I'm happy that HMPO, and I really want HMPO to push hard in this area.
Definitely.
Sorry about that, being selfish, but hey.
I'm glad we finished on your expertise in particular. Um, just to wrap up, in June we've obviously got Identity Week Europe again. You're going to be delivering a session as an independent speaker on kind of how comparing the ID systems across countries and the challenges, and if things go wrong, how do we
Mm.
prevent or recover those situations? So it's going to be interesting. It's going to spark some genuine debate and discussion. Have you got any closing comments on that?
Yeah, just that now I'm outside of government. I admit I'm still, the Official Secrets Act still covers me, and I've got to be careful in what I say, and that I don't upset people or break the law or anything like that. But there's a certain freedom to be had once you've left government, and I've seen some of my friends across the world who've also left government recently are freer and able to say things that they weren't allowed to before. To actually express an opinion is very liberating, I have to say. So when I present at Identity Week Europe in Amsterdam in June, I'm going to be able to be a bit more forthcoming on all the errors and mistakes I've seen over the years that many countries make. I will be careful not to name names where something's not in the public domain or to upset anything, compromise anyone's security. But yeah, I'm looking forward to providing a really juicy presentation. And of course, I'll aim to give people a few hints and tips as to how to both avoid or recover from when things go wrong. And if any one country ever says to you, we've never made a mistake or we've never done anything wrong, either it means they don't know that what they've done wrong or they're just flat out lying to you. So I'm really looking forward to my session.
Yeah, definitely. We're looking forward to having you. It's great to catch up. I think it's been a wonderful conversation. As you say, we've managed to talk quite freely, and yeah, we look forward to seeing you in June.
Excellent. I'll see you there.